I have to share with you all because I just got very exciting news that my best friend just went into labor, which is so many emotions just getting that one text. It's wild. Oh, Mayor, I think you're muted.
Here, down here, or up north?
She's up in Portland.
Oh,
Yeah. So I'll go visit her in a couple weeks when they're all settled.
it's some baby time. That's some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm excited.
Wow, that's really neat.
Right. Hector, I'm going to begin recording right now just in case we forget.
Oh, it's recording. Jordan.
Oh, look at that. Perfect.
But it sounds to me like we recorded that reaction of the good news.
This is the most important part of the public record right there.
Well, you should go back and see your face. It was pretty sweet. All right, I think we're just waiting on Councilor Clark. There we go. The gang's all here. So let's go ahead and call the Talent City Council meeting of July 20th, 2022 to order at 6:45 p.m. Roll call, please.
Councilor Clark.
Here.
Councilor Penimroth.
Here.
Councilor Greider.
Here.
Councilor Pestiza.
Here.
Councilor Byers.
Here.
Councilor Parra-Miller.
Here.
And Mayor Ayersflood.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Hector. Item number 2 on the agenda is meeting accessibility. Hector?
It's a question for the public. If any of the attendees need this meeting translated into Spanish, we ask that they raise their hand now. Y una pregunta para el público. Si alguien necesitará esta reunión interpretada en español, por favor, alce su mano hoy, and I'll watch the attendees, Mayor.
Thank you, Hector. Item number 3 on the agenda is additions or corrections to the agenda. Anybody?
Yeah,
Jordan?
I do tonight, please, Mayor. If we could please move item 10.1, which is a presentation on the Regional Long-Term Recovery Plan project, to 6 public presentations, just to help Karen leave a little earlier. There will be no ask of council tonight, so it'll be just a presentation. And my second request for an addition is to add item 10.4 to new business, which will be appointing a hearing officer for the city.
And we're adding 10.4, correct?
Please.
Yeah. Or, so it would be really 10.3, wouldn't it?
It would be once we move 10.1.
Okay. Hearings officer, okay. Great. Thank you, Jordan. Any objections to the changes? Seeing none. The item on the next item on the agenda is community announcements. Staff report, staff, do you have any community announcements? Hector?
Mayor, I have 2 announcements. The Red Cross will be here on August 1st for their community blood drive. We encourage people to sign up by visiting the city website and or any links that on this associated post on our social media. And there will be COVID testing being done by the University of Oregon here at the community center, starting on July 3rd from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then once again on August 13th and August 27th. And in addition to the COVID testing, there could be the possibility that they'll be adding vaccinations, COVID vaccinations.
Wow, great. Anybody else? All right. The next item on the agenda is item 5, speakers heard on non-agenda items. Are there any speaker request forms?
Mayor, I've received 2 speaker request forms, one from Chris Lutz and another from Derek Manzi, and they're both in the audience today.
Are they both for non-agenda?
Mr. Lutz has 2 requests, one for item 10.3 and to speak on a non-agenda item.
Okay, so let's go ahead and call forward the guests or the agenda speakers for non-agenda. Excuse me, the speakers on non-agenda item.
Hello, Madam Mayor. This is Chris Lutz over here in Phoenix. Now, I am speaking on urban renewal, but not specifically about the renewal plan consideration process. Would you want me to speak about urban renewal in general during agenda item 10.3? Or do you want me to speak about it during this part of the meeting?
Chris, why don't you go ahead and just proceed with what you were planning? It's, let's see, do you have two items?
No, it's actually one item I want to speak about, but I don't know if it's going to pertain to the agenda item that we're on currently, non-agenda items, or if it's going to pertain to the consideration process for TURA, even though what I'm talking about is not specifically about the consideration process.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and hear you when it works for you? I mean, it's not going to be any different really. So you can choose what.
Okay, I'll do it right now.
All right.
On Tuesday, Talent did their urban renewal presentation to Jackson County. It was a very interesting and informative meeting, but I can't find the audio of that meeting on either the Talent site or your Talent urban renewal site. And I was hoping to be able to find that or have it there so citizens can hear, your citizens can hear what happened at that meeting. So I encourage you to post it on your own sites. But for those who want to hear it, just go to the Jackson County meeting site and take a look at the audio that happened on the, I guess it was the 19th. And I'm going to send a link out regarding the audio anyway. Anyway, during the meeting, Jackson County Administrator said of the proposed Talent urban renewal plan, and I'm going to quote exactly, he said, "My opinion is that it is maniacal and it hurts people to an extreme that is unacceptable." One commissioner spoke of TURA plan as disingenuous to our taxpayers when the numbers are misleading or a misrepresentation. And I'm going to speak to those numbers in just a moment. It's very important. The administrator went on to say, it uniquely hurts other taxing districts. That hasn't happened before, especially your fire district. Now to the numbers. The projections being used by Talent as part of their presentation to the public in general and the overlapping taxing districts and your own citizens in particular, I believe, like Jackson County said, they are misleading and they are misrepresentation. I hate to say that, but I really believe it based on my own analysis. Now, Eleanor, David, Jason, Anna, Nicole, and Colette, please hear me. There are 246 residential home lots in the proposed urban renewal district. These will comprise most of the taxable assessed value. The plan predicts, and Jordan predicts, that about 75% of those homes will be rebuilt this year, or 188 homes. Those home lots in the burn scar are currently assessed based on just raw land. That's your frozen tax base, and they're valued at about $85,000 to $90,000. Taxes currently are about $1,000, which is the frozen base. When you add a home this year to those lots, and a home that's selling for astronomical amounts, the assessed value is going to be $350,000, $450,000, maybe higher. But when you add a home to those tax lots, the taxes will go from $1,000 to about $5,000. The math is simple. 1,000 to 5,000, it's an increase of $4,000 or 400%. Your plan docs in your website talks about 7.2% growth rate. It is so far off, it's just unbelievable. It's criminal, the numbers that are being presented versus the actual numbers. And you can go to the Jackson County tax records and see for yourself. Just take a look at a couple of properties on the tax records. You'll see that what I'm saying is absolutely true. And that's going to happen to 246 properties. The growth rate is phenomenal. All of that money, the $4,000, the addition above 1,000, the whole thing goes to urban renewal. It's gigantic. You're minimizing in your projections the impacts on the overlapping taxing districts. The amount projected as an impact to the fire district is, I believe, 50% understated. Where I'm going with this is I encourage you. Now, Jordan's trying, but she's not an expert on numbers. She doesn't run a consulting firm regarding numbers and projections. You got to relook at the projections and the numbers and come up with accurate projections and numbers to present to your stakeholders, the public, and the city of Talent. Yeah, so that's what I had to say tonight, guys. Get an independent assessment of your numbers. I think they're way off. I'll send you my numbers, and I'm more than welcome to talk to anybody regarding my numbers. If you think I'm wrong, tell me about it. But you have a fiduciary responsibility to at least check it out, give me a call, give somebody else a call that's doing an analysis, and really delve into the numbers before you make a 30-year impact decision. Thank you for listening, and I'm here for you if you have any questions.
Thank you, Chris. The next speaker?
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. I listened to the recording of the tour presentation to the County Commissioner Board yesterday, and Mayor Ayers-Flood attended that meeting virtually, and she was not able to be part of the conversation during the actual presentation, which I found to be very unfortunate because there were multiple questions posed that she was not able to directly answer at the time of asking, which I think would have made that whole presentation much more engaging and informative, although she took great notes and really answered a lot of those questions later in that whole recording. But when she was finally unmuted and allowed to speak, she said, and I'll quote it, I want to make sure I get it accurate here. "Had I known I was going to be kept in a room where I couldn't participate, I would have shown up." And I feel the same way about our current city council interim meetings. I'm very much looking forward to being able to attend these meetings in person. Other cities, such as Phoenix, have moved to a hybrid format, allowing those who wish to attend in person to do so, and those who do not still to attend virtually. And I guess my question here, is there a planned date for the City of Talent to move to a hybrid model of in-person and virtual attendance of city council and tour meetings? That's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other speaker request forms for tonight?
Mayor, I do not have any additional speaker request forms, but I do see that someone in the attendees has raised their hand, Mr. Derek Volkart.
Okay, thank you, Hector. Please bring Mr. Volkart forward. And Derek, please state your name and city for the record. You're muted, Derek. Derek, I don't know if you can hear me, but you're muted. You were unmuted for a second, but you're muted again. So I'm gonna take it that oh, there he is. Can you unmute, Derek? Okay. You want to try again later? If you get your technical issues worked out, I will hear you at any time. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and move on then to the next item on the agenda is item 6.1. These are public presentations, and Jackson County Long-Term Recovery Group is with us tonight. Staff, do you want to introduce?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We'd love to invite up Karen Wheeler-Clay, who is Executive Director of the Jackson County Long-Term Recovery Group, who is here to present on their Regional Long-Term Recovery Plan. And so I'd like to invite Karen up. And Karen, let me know if you'd like me to drive the slides for you, or if it's easier for you to do it on your end.
Pardon me, this is my first time being a panelist, so I'm learning this end of the technology. Thank you so much for having me. Jordan, yeah, if you could share my slides, that would be great. Perfect, thank you. So I'm here before you today, just kind of giving you an update. I know there's been a lot of talk about the long-term recovery plan, and I'm grateful to be here today to sort of talk to you about the long-term recovery group and our relationship to long-term recovery planning today. Next slide. So we were formed in the aftermath of the fires on September 8th of 2020. And the long-term recovery groups are typically a best practice post-disaster that is sort of shown to communities by FEMA, and then FEMA gets folks in a room and then says, Godspeed, good luck, and sends us on our merry way. And so we are fortunate that we had some really great leaders step forward into that space to start the work of developing this group. Deanne Everson and Blanca Lucy Brassard with the Phoenix Talent Schools, and Mark Peterson and others really came together around this idea of helping to maintain sort of the systems awareness of recovery and how we keep each other connected and focused on the after effects, right? And how we move towards this vision of delivering an equitable and inclusive recovery that brings disaster survivors home. Next slide. And so the way we have structured ourselves is really setting ourselves around the priorities of service to survivors, and doing that through connecting not only resources, but also partners to each other, and then amplifying any challenges, gaps, or barriers to recovery so we can work creatively at the local level, connect in with our state partners, and amplify into national platforms when needed. We are also growing our capacity to serve through the relationships that we establish in this process. We work with private philanthropy, we work with nonprofit groups, we work with faith-based organizations and civic-based groups and local jurisdictional partners like yourself. And we cover lots of different areas. We're bringing partners together around disaster case management, developing sort of a shared case management structure, because we have 3 entities holding disaster case management right now. We also have a communications work group that is helping to distill some of the more complex messages that come out from the state or FEMA, and so folks know where the action points are for them. And then also working on fundraising and emotional and spiritual care. And one function that has gotten a lot of attention is our unmet needs table. We have to date helped 94 households complete their recovery plans that they developed in partnership with those disaster case managers, and provided in excess of $1.65 million in financial support to that end. We've covered everything from solar panels to windows and doors, to home purchases, to rehab for homes that were purchased that needed some updating, to accordions. So we have helped in whatever way we have been able to, through the generous support of private philanthropy, and groups like the Red Cross, right? They collected a lot of donations up front, and then they were able to distribute those back to survivors through groups like the Long-Term Recovery Group. Next slide. And so one of the key things that is coming up most recently is the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Relief PEER program, and PEER stands for Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Revitalization. So $42 million of the $422 million that was allocated to the state under CDBG-DR is earmarked specifically for planning, infrastructure, and economic revitalization. And so for each county allocation for Jackson County, it'll be $13.8 million, which is roughly 32.9% of the overall allocation for this program, will be held here in Jackson County, and then a regional body will be established with representatives from the municipalities that were impacted, the economic development district, so in our community that would be So Ready, and then the long-term recovery group to help select eligible planning, economic revitalization, or infrastructure projects for the Oregon Housing and Community Services folks to approve. Next slide. Sorry, my dog has decided he wants in the office. So if you hear the door knocking, it's him. So what we are proposing is that a really key part of what has not been done to date is developing a regional long-term recovery plan strategy. This is another best practice post-disaster. A group of us went down to Paradise last year in August, and they started this process 3 months after their fires. And so we are quite a bit of a ways out from our disaster. But we know that a lot of great work has been done to date. And so the principles behind this are making sure that it's locally controlled and coordinated and based on deep community engagement and resident involvement. And the focus is on projects that most contribute to community recovery. Next slide. And so a lot has happened in the last 24 months. We know this, right? We're coming up on the 2-year anniversary, and how do we start this process now? Next slide. We measure the progress, right? We measure all of the great work that's been done today because quite a bit has been accomplished. We have moved phenomenal mountains in this last period of time, but we still have a long way to go. And so we have the opportunity to educate residents and stakeholders on the recovery efforts to date across the burn scar and around the community, provide opportunities for additional resident and stakeholder input, create one overall blueprint for rebuilding that will strengthen future grant applications. So CDBG-DR is part of the funding picture. It is not all of it. Even if we got all $422 million to Jackson County, we would still need more, right? We know that we have so far to go still. And so having this collaborative, reflective process provides us an opportunity to develop a package of projects that are actionable and ready to go. So in actionable, we define that as having a project lead and a defined project budget. So for each of those projects, we would know who's going to take point and what it's going to take to get there. And so some of these projects may already be underway, but helping to clarify it and bring light to it in this broader planning process will help to focus some of the incoming dollars. So where I have seen this sort of collective process work before is in my background in community development and public health as the accreditation coordinator for the health department in Jackson County. And then with my work with OSU, we focused a lot of energy on building coalitions and collaborative processes with health system partners across Jackson and Josephine counties so that we were able to develop a community health assessment and improvement planning process that built the consensus we needed to start drawing down additional funds around housing for all and resilience for families and children and behavioral health, right? Again, it's still very far to go because we don't pick simple issues, right? These are complex issues that take time, but having this sort of foundational document will strengthen a lot of our future grant funding opportunities and pursuits. Next slide. So we will take this process and this opportunity to listen to community through surveying, community meetings, both virtual and in person, because we know there is a big digital divide and we want to make sure that our partners are included, our survivors are included across the geographic region, and community open houses. So with over 100 households still in emergency sheltering and 364 households still in process with disaster case managers, we know that's just the tip of the iceberg. So many folks are still coming forward when we have community events. You know, I think at every resource fair that RAC has held, we've had at least 3 new survivors step forward. And so the question remains, who is left to be served? And this is a good opportunity to continue to make those connections. Next slide. So through this process, we'll benchmark progress, celebrate our successes, share those broadly, listen to community, figure out where our gaps and challenges to recovery are, come up with solutions, right? Because the answer is almost always in the room. There's brilliant ideas in our community. We've seen magic happen. And so what happens when we invite more people to the table around this? And then document the findings, come up with that list of actionable projects. That does not mean if you guys come, and when this comes to you later and we ask you to adopt it, it doesn't mean you're going to identify every single project as something you're going to do, right? There may be 20, 40, 50 projects. There will be projects that you have specifically highlighted that you want to take ownership of, but you are acknowledging the utility of this shared process. And so when you adopt it, you would be adopting the project that you have already been made aware of and worked with your staff to develop. Next slide. So that about sums it up. Comments, questions? Can we stop the screen share, Jordan, so I can see faces? Thank you.
Jordan?
Yeah, Karen, can you just explain a little bit about what the next step in the process for this project would be and when City Council might see it again?
So we have a draft of a letter of agreement out to partners right now to review and provide some final feedback. They should be getting it to me by today. And I will be pulling that feedback together. And then we are going to start shopping it back around to you all to sign off on, right? Because we will be pulling together a steering committee to help shepherd this process. So the long-term recovery group has secured funding for the majority of this effort through considerable funding by the Red Cross. We also have some additional asks for some pass-through funding for municipal wildfire assistance that was earmarked for long-term recovery groups by Business Oregon. And then we will start forming that steering committee. So the question for jurisdictional partners is who on your staff would take point for you. And then you would assign that staff person to be on the steering committee. The consultant that we have hired is the same one that did the process for Paradise. And so we will work in partnership with them. So they will sort of shepherd the entire process. The LTRG will help coordinate it. And then the steering committee will advise the work of getting the process moved forward.
Council Greiner?
I think I know your slide had a timeline through this year, right? Like the last there was fall. Yeah. What do you have an idea of how long you foresee? I mean, does that mean that you're thinking things are wrapped up by that time, or that's
the planning process, developing the planning process. So they'll go into report writing in the fall.
Okay,
in
and
late fall, winter. Because we started this process and then got stalled a couple times. So,
got it.
yeah, but it should take between 4 and 5 months.
How long do you see the LTRG existing? Do you have any vision of that for the future?
So long-term recovery groups in practice are around anywhere between 3 and 10-year organizations, as long as they are necessary, right? Some communities in Florida where hurricanes happen frequently, in parts of the Midwest where tornadoes are pretty consistent. LTRGs have been around for a long, long time. Oregon is new to this. Given the scope and impact of this disaster, we've estimated it could be between 5 and 7 years. And again, that is assuming we never have another disaster. And I think we're all very hopeful, right? But hope isn't going to get us very far. And so this is that effort to really plan out and be methodical and intentional about a resilient and equitable recovery that will put us in a better position for better outcomes for this disaster and the next one.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you so much for the great presentation. We look forward to watching this unfold and seeing how the recovery is forecasted. Really appreciate all the great work that you and your team are doing, and you are right. You have quite a dream team, so we're really excited about this. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. Okay.
All right, the next item on the agenda is department reports. Staff?
Yes, so in the packet is our summary report from the departments. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have about that report and attachments.
Anybody? Councilor Panamarev?
Yeah, thanks. Jordan, I was hoping you could just speak a little bit about the Valley View project. I read your report. It was really good. I just feel like there's a lot of misconceptions floating around about that. And also the timeline, has been unfortunate with the delays. So I think in your report, you said first or second week of August, it should all be done. And anyway, I was just wondering if you could just say a few words.
Absolutely, and we actually have this as a separate line item under unfinished business.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have some visuals to share with council as well.
Oh, that's great. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay, great. Councilor Clark.
Yeah, I was just looking at the table of grant information and was looking at the Bear Creek Hazardous Fuels Reduction grant for about $1.5 million. Are there any updates on that? I know that was submitted some time ago. Do we know anything about the timeline for that being awarded or anything about that?
Yeah, I have had no word on that one. I have reached out to the state and they have forwarded it to FEMA. So we know that it is in their hands now, but I have not received any communication on that grant.
I just, do you have any follow-ups on that, Councilor Clark? Okay. I just have a comment. I had a conversation about employment today, and we were just talking about how employment issues continue, and everybody is still struggling so much in just about all segments to try and get employees. So it's pretty exciting to see you having a little bit of luck in the police department and having some folks in the background. It's I know that you guys are facing some very challenging employment market issues and deploying some really creative solutions. And it looks like they're working. So congratulations to you and Chief Snook for your ingenuity and the successes on that front.
Thank you.
So it's 2 officers in background and 1. Is the lateral is not the same as the 2 recruits? So you have a total of 3 officers in background, right?
We have a total of 3 officers in background. 2 would be full-time recruits, and the lateral, we're looking at is a part-time temporary position just to cover patrol shifts. Since right now we are having to pull a lot of overtime and work with other agencies to get coverage.
Yep, great. Sounds very encouraging. All right. Are there any other questions or comments on the staff report? Yeah, just thank you to all, everybody for the good information that makes sometimes asking and answering questions for us in the community a lot easier. The next item on the agenda is, Jordan, staff, did you have anything else to add before I move on? Okay. The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Anything out there, anything on the consent calendar that we want to carve out for discussion? All right. Everybody's had a chance. Councilor Clark?
Yeah, just one question on the check register. Just curious what we rented from United Rentals for $25,195.
Do I have my mute on? Yeah. Brett, do you mind sharing what that one was? I shut down my check budget thing. Oh, I know what that one was. Pardon me. We purchased a generator. Brett, is that the right one? We purchased it from the used rental equipment.
Yeah, that actually rings a bell. I'm sorry, I was kind of set back by that myself. We rented a skid steer. I was thinking that it might have been a typo because it was around 2,500, but the generator was in excess of 25,000. That makes more sense.
So it was
It
a
wasn't
city
rental purchase.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. And I just did verify by pulling up my screen. We purchased a generator for the police facility so that in the event of a large scale of electrical grid failure, the police would be able to go up and operational, and we could hold an EOC out of that department.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I will share just with council, we have also applied for additional generators to have at our community center as well, so that can also be a shelter or other emergency use. So it's also a FEMA grant, so hoping we hear back relatively soon.
Okay, so if those are all the questions, I will entertain a motion. Anybody? All right. Councilor Perry Miller?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Council Clerk,
Yes.
Councilor Penrose,
Yes.
Councilor Greider,
Yes.
Councilor Pestizo,
Yes.
Councilor Byers,
Yes.
Councilor Perry Miller.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mayor.
Item number 9 is unfinished business. 9.1 is request for funds from the Talent Historical Society staff.
Yes, so we've been approached by the Talent Historical Society. Let me do a quick screen share here. To help support the translation of the Almeida Fire Stories book into Spanish. City Council did appropriate some of our fiscal year 22 dollars to help publish the Almeida Fire Storybook. At that time, there was discussion about encouraging the Historical Society to translate it into Spanish. They have since gone out and gotten quotes for that translation, and they're asking for a portion of that translation to be covered by Talent if possible. I do have Willa McLeod from Talent Historical Society here to answer any questions that council may have of this request.
Well, Willow, I'm so glad to see this project moving along. And just to let you know that you are muted. Are there any questions or comments for Willow?
There you go.
There we go.
Do you have a presentation for us, Willow?
We do. I'm just trying to not be computer illiterate here.
You're doing
So
fine.
sorry. The problem is that I can't see. So I'm assuming that you guys have looked over the what Deborah has sent, the project phases. It's up on the screen now. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay. And so we found a translator for the whole book documenting the Alameda fire. Her name's Alita Mark, and she's a teacher at Talent Middle School. She's willing to work for $55 an hour, or approximately $37.50 per page. We're figuring 250 to 280 pages with approximately 180 pages of text. So $37.50 per page for translation equals a one-time cost of $6,750. So we will apply to the Jackson County Cultural Trust, the JCCC, for $2,000 of this translation cost. The JCC's goals and their grant fundings are to ensure access to cultural activities and the arts, heritage, and humanities for all residents of Jackson County. They're interested. In conclusion, they are interested. They funded us before for this amount, and the fact that translation would be pertinent to their goals makes it likely they'd grant us this money. So we're going to ask them for $2,000. That would mean that we would only ask the City of Talent for $4,750 at this time, which would bring the total of the book to finish it would be $6,750. So however, if we don't receive these funds, we will have to come back to the city and ask for the $2,000 remaining to translate the entire book or narrow down some of the translation, whatever that may be. And then lastly, we did find out the printing cost per 100 books on lulu.com is an 8x5 by 11 letter size glossy full color throughout 280 pages is $14.96 per book. So approximately $1,488 for printing and shipping. The initial costs and reprinting in the future will be covered by book sales and supplemental funds from the Historical Society if needed. Are there any questions from you guys?
Councilman Amrith, and then Jordan.
Okay.
Yeah, hi Willow.
Hi there.
So this is so great. And I'm really glad you're reaching out to multiple sources. I'm just curious how you came up with the 2,000 to ask from the Jackson County cultural folks. Is that how they package their grants, or I'm just wondering how you came up with that amount?
Right. They kind of have done things for around 2,000. I mean, I wish Deborah was here to answer that accordingly because she's our grant writer and she's out of town. But I think that for some reason, she didn't think that we'd be able to get any more than that from them.
I could speak to their granting process if you would like.
Yes.
You're correct. Is this allowed?
Please.
So Willow is correct in that I'm sorry. The Jackson County Cultural Coalition prefers to provide seed money for projects and often does not exceed the amount of $3,000 total. They also base their granting off of a percentage of the total project budget, and they will not fully fund a project. They also prefer projects that show that there is buy-in from the wider community, other stakeholders, or other organizations.
Beautifully said.
Thank you, Anna. That's helpful context. Jordan?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out and make an apology to Willow. My misunderstanding in the staff report, I had only put the request for the translation funds. I want to just clarify with council since it is different in the staff report. I'm seeing now the request is for the $6,250 to help support book printing. So just to fix that for the record.
Yeah, so for the record, it would be a total of 4,750 that we would request from the City of Talent. And in hopes that we would be able to get the 2,000 from JCC for the remaining.
Council Byers?
Thank you. I'm curious, since you have someone on your team that does grant writing, what other grants you may have potentially applied for to support this project from other organizations?
The OCT grant?
Oregon Cultural Trust?
Oregon Cultural Trust, but that's the only one that I know of that she has going on, that we're still waiting to hear back. That's the one that will help build our fire display, among other things.
There's the PPL grant,
PPL.
500 that are supporting all costs.
Yeah.
And that one is through the Oregon Community Foundation, correct? If I remember correctly?
The PPL?
PPL is Pacific Power.
Okay, so there is a similar series of letters through an Oregon Community Foundation grant. Thank you.
It's other parts of the same project.
Thank you.
I have a question of staff. The staff report says that there's the 10,000 some odd dollars for the discretionary fund. Is that for the whole year?
That is the balance for the whole year.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Councilor Byers?
Well, I am 100% supportive of helping get this book translated. I also feel like there's, and I also want to recognize that I know that all of this effort is done by a team of volunteers who have many other things going on in their life. I do also feel like, based on the fact that I do quite a bit of grant writing for arts organizations, I feel like there are some additional grant funds out there that would be thrilled to support this project as well. This is right up the alley of a lot of funders right now.
Do you have any in mind that you could share with us?
Sure. If anyone else wants to speak, I'm going to start pulling up the very specific names. I don't want to get them
I know
wrong.
Deborah's extremely thorough. She fine-tooth combs everything, but I'm sure there's still more out there that can be seen. And
yeah, rather than going through, this is Ron Mettinger. I'm sorry, I'm not really Willow McLeod with a deep voice. I'm here with Willow at the Historical Society to attend. Councilor Byers, if there's some you would like to suggest, I would suggest that we have Deborah Moon contact you possibly by email.
Yeah.
When she's back in town, because she is our grant writer. And so she would probably have questions, and the two of you communicating would be better than us trying to pass a message on.
I would be so happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Councilor Byers, for being willing to help on this front. I'm wondering if it makes sense for that conversation to take place and see what the other options are before we kind of target or even miss-target an amount of money, especially given the finite amount that is in the discretionary fund, or the low amount.
The only comment I would have is, I know Deborah told me that the translator was ready to start working on this very, very soon. And to proceed, we are going to have some funds to do that. So if you could maybe do a partial from the discretionary fund, that would get us going. And normally, as you probably all know, grant writing takes some time. And I think we have to look at that, or we're just going to, postpone this and postpone this and postpone this.
Exactly.
We're already 2 years out from the fire, and we're trying hard to get this historical document produced. So that's my 2 cents worth.
She did have a real difficult time finding a translator that was the price that we finally found.
And I think
available.
part of that is, as we said, it's a middle school teacher, and she's going to go back to school and have to teach.
We have a small window.
I do think it's worth commending this effort for finding a translator and hiring a translator, and you know, those services. It shows a great deal of respect for those services when we provide for them. So, okay, I'm opening it up to the council. Council Penamarath?
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether there's a way we could just authorize the city manager to an amount up to get them going and pending whatever other money, grant money they're able to get. Or alternatively, whether naming an amount like $2,000 would be enough to get the translator started.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan. I think pretty much any approach is possible based on the direction of the council.
One thing, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
You know, one thing that I could look into, it wouldn't be a guarantee. Our municipal wildfire assistance program, we do have a section of funds that we're using for our own Spanish communication. And I can check with that grant administrator to see if this would qualify under that. So if council wanted to direct me tonight to a certain dollar amount, I could first follow the avenue to see if those funds would be eligible. And then do council discretionary as the backup if not.
Can you tell me what, do you know what the fund amount is currently?
For council discretionary or for municipal wildfire assistance program?
Yeah, for the MWAP fund.
Specific to Spanish communication, I'd have to look up how much is still remaining in that category. But I do know overall we have about $300,000 left for total for the next year.
Yeah, the total fund. And I mean, for the record, to clarify for everybody that there's buckets that has to be used in, right? So you're specifically talking about the translation bucket, and you're not aware of what's in there right now.
You want, while we're having a discussion, I can go ahead and pull it up to take a look.
Council Penamarath?
So if we were going to have a up to a certain amount, I was wondering, Jordan, if you could remind us of what that amount is. I wrote down 6,250, something like that.
Yeah, and Willow, you can correct me. My understanding is total request is 6,250, 4,750, which is specific to translation, and the remainder was specific to printing of the book. Willow, was that correct?
Well, it basically 4,750 is the translation in total of the book.
No.
Right? No, I mean, sorry, of what we're asking for the city. And the total translation cost for everything is 6,750. And we're hoping to get the $2,000 grant from the JCC, and which would mean a remainder balance of 4,750, which covers the whole thing.
And so for clarification, you're not asking for any part of the printing cost, right?
Everything. That's the printing cost, the shipping cost, the translation cost.
No.
Right?
No.
What is
the
that?
Printing costs are down here.
I'm so sorry. Hold on a minute. Let me get my.
It's okay, Willow. We totally understand.
Asking for both translation costs and printing costs.
We're asking for both the translation costs and printing costs.
Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Jordan was correct that the total ask is 6,250.
The total
Oh, between-
the total need is 62, is 6750, but we're asking the city of
No,
Talent.
no, what she's saying is this plus this.
Oh, I see. Deborah didn't itemize that part out for me in the highlighter.
I'm actually tracking, I'm tracking what you guys are all saying, and so, correct me if I'm wrong. There's a total ask from the city for $47.50 for translation, and an additional amount that brings it to $62.50 to cover the printing. The last sentence in this request says, request from City of Talent for translation and printing at this time is $62.50. The requested funds are for the highlighted portions of the project above.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
My bad.
No, it's not your bad. As you said, you can't see the screen. So thank you, Jordan, for sussing out that clarification. So sounds to me like the MWAP funds might cover translation, but not necessarily printing. Is that a good question, Jordan?
I would assume that. I cannot guarantee that MWAP would fund the translation. I would have to double check. I did look, we have about $20,000 left in our Spanish communication budget, which is about a year's worth of the Spanish publications that we've been doing.
Is there any other funds for those publications?
At the moment, they are entirely grant funded. We would have to look through for a different source beyond the MWAP.
And those publications are used to communicate city business to Spanish-speaking residents and community members, correct?
Yeah, particularly as it relates to fire recovery work. We take out a monthly, we publish monthly articles in Caminos Revista. So similar to our Talent News and Review, that is the most widespread Spanish publication in our valley. We are also hosting somostalent.org, which is a Spanish website where we're posting city information and some of the things what we have on our website entirely in Spanish.
Councillor Panamarev?
I think I have a motion.
Okay, go.
Okay.
Wait a minute, let me ask, does anybody else have any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I'm going to pop it in the chat and read it at the same time. I move to authorize the city manager to allocate up to $6,250 of council discretionary funds for Talent Historical Society's Alameda Fire Stories project, depending on other sources of funding, including MWAP. Does that sound okay?
Is there a second? Anybody?
I'll second it so we can discuss.
We have a motion and a second to move to authorize the city manager to allocate up to $62.50 of council discretionary funds for Talent Historical Society Alameda Fire Stories project, depending on other sources of funding, including MWAP. Discussion? Councillor Panamarev, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, I think I've said enough.
Anybody else? Councillor Perry Miller.
I'm sorry, Jordan, can you say the amount we have in discretionary again?
10,300.
Okay. So I guess my question would just be, what does the word depending mean in that motion?
Jordan?
Yeah, I would love to help make the recommendation of maybe doing $1,000 to $2,000 for now to help get the work started and also encourage other funders to come in as well. And then I can work and check in with MWAP to see what the flexibility is to understand if there is additional funds too that could potentially occur.
Councillor Clark?
Yeah, I super excited about this project, and I'm really glad that it's happening. And I think it's important that it be translated into Spanish. And I'm looking forward to seeing that. I just have reservations about allocating such a large proportion of the council discretionary fund to a single project in the first month of the fiscal year. And would like to, it would be more more palatable if the costs were shared a little more broadly from some other sources. That's the reason for my reservation. It's not a lack of enthusiasm or excitement about the project at all.
Councilor Penamrev.
So I'm hearing that we should amend the amount to like 1,000 or 2,000. So I think if somebody would just make an amendment to change the amount to whatever, I think that would work. The other thing that it feels like we're thinking that the council discretionary fund is some sort of, set amount, and I don't think that's the case. As the council, we can move funds around to projects that are deserving throughout the year with resolution, is my understanding. So I'm not as concerned about the limits on the discretionary fund, but that may be a misperception on my part. But at this point, I think an amendment would be really great.
Anybody wish to amend? Councilor Byers?
I have an amendment ready, but I will speak to this before that. I agree. I think this is something that the historical document, it's an exciting project. It's being done with so much care and respect. I do think it would be great to hold some space for some other potential supporters or stakeholders before we move to fund the entire thing. So with that, I move to amend the motion such a, we've never done this before.
You're doing great so far.
Okay. I move to amend the motions so it says, I move to authorize the city manager to allocate up to $2,000 of council discretionary funds for Talent Historical Society's Almeda Fire Stories project, depending on other sources of funding, including MWAP.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend the motion to say that I move to allocate $2,000 of council discretionary funds for the Talent Historical Society's Almeda Fire Stories project. Did I get that right? And there's a second. Any discussion on the amendment? Councilor Byers, do you wish to speak to your motion?
I'm excited this is happening. I am. I'm so supportive of it.
Councilor Pestizo?
Yeah, like everyone else, I think this is a really great project and want to support it, but I'm still sort of struggling with the language of the amendment because I'm not sure, like Councilor Perry Miller brought up, I'm not sure what depends means in this.
So the way the amendment was framed was to replace the language with to allocate. So depending if this amendment passes, I think that that depending piece falls. Is that right, Councilor Penamrev?
I thought I heard that again in the amendment.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. So there's Robert's rules, there's a couple ways you do it. You can either say, take out this word, replace this word if the intent was just to replace the amount, but Councilor Byers reworded the motion, I think intentionally, somewhat. So you can just copy it and make the changes that you want, maybe pop that in, and that'll be like the amended motion to read, and then the entire, like you were doing, which is absolutely fine. But
so when I read the motion, when I reread the motion or restated the motion, was that correct, Councilor Byers? Did I restate it correctly? If not, please just go ahead and drop it in the chat and I'll do it again.
I'll just drop it in the chat no matter what. How about that?
Sounds perfect. Sorry, I apologize. I did miss some of it. We have a motion and a second. To move to authorize the city, to amend language to say, I move to authorize the city manager to allocate up to $2,000 of council discretionary funds for Talent Historical Society's Almeida Stories project, depending on other sources of funding, including MWAP. Discussion? Is your comment still the same, Councilor Pestizo?
Yeah, but I'm curious to hear what Jordan has to say.
Okay, and your hand is still up, just so you know.
Yeah.
Councilor Jordan?
Just to make sure that my understanding of the intent of this motion is accurate, so that I implement it accurately if it is passed. So my understanding is I will allocate $2,000, first looking for other funds within the city's budget, for example, MWAP funds. In the event that MWAP funds, for example, are not available to be used, I will use council discretionary funds.
Okay, that helped me understand it better.
Anybody understand it differently? Okay, so for the record, it's as Jordan stated. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilor Clark,
Yes.
Councilor Penamrough,
Yes.
Councilor Greider.
Yes.
Councilor Pestizo,
Yes.
Councilor Byers,
Yes.
Councilor Party Miller.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mayor.
Thank you, Hector. All right, and how do we dispose of the original motion, Councilor Penamrough?
So that was the amended motion. It was replacement, but it was still an amendment. So now we have to vote on the original motion as amended.
Any discussion on the original motion as amended? So basically, we're just voting on the exact same thing again. Yeah. Seeing no further discussion, roll call, please.
Councilor Clark,
Yes.
Councilor Penamrough,
Yes.
Councilor Greider,
Yes.
Councilor Pestizo,
Yes.
Councilor Byers,
Yes.
Councilor Party Miller.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mayor.
Thank you, Hector. All right. Thank you, Talent Historical Society, for the great work you're doing in telling this most important story. And again, in seeking out and hiring translation that helps the whole community when we proceed like that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Council, for your support.
Yes. Thank you all.
Right.
Thank you for being creative. You said, Councilor Byers, that you're going to email Deborah Moon.
She doesn't know that she's still on. Maybe we can mute her, and I just don't want her to say anything. There you go. I'd hate for her to. All right. So the next item on the agenda is, sorry, I'm a little bit lost. Here we go. 9.2, update on the West Valley View Road reprofile project. Staff report.
Yes, thank you. This is on the agenda tonight because there is construction currently going on West Valley View. And we've had a lot of interest by community members of what that project is and what the outcome will be and how it's impacting the community. So I wanted to put it on tonight's agenda just to share the overview of the project and its current state. Staff is also preparing an article to share in the Talent News and Review for August, as well as to post online, hopefully this week. But I want to point out to you all what you see on the screen is some of our engineered plans for what it should look like when it's all done. So this here is Highway 99 and West Valley View heading towards the freeway. And so really how this West Valley View Reprofile project came about is it's actually a combination of 3 separate projects from our transportation system plan that was adopted in 2015. The first project, project 1, is restriping of West Valley View to add this center refuge lane. So this is really a project that was intended to improve safety for both vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists. Having that center turn lane just helps, reduce the rear ends for folks turning in and out of the various driveways along West Valley View. It is considered a safety feature transportation-wise. The other project is project 15 in the transportation system plan, and that is to do hardscaped bike lane protections. So that is creating an actual barrier between the bike lane and the cars. In this project, they're actually bioswales, so they're providing additional stream protection on top of bicyclist and pedestrian protection. Then the last element of this project is from project 19, our transportation system plan, and that's to install a crosswalk here. This crosswalk, what it serves to do is it connects a future walking path along Wagner Creek across the path that'll connect it to the Bear Creek Greenway pathway. The other benefit of this crosswalk is it's connecting, very residential areas to the commercial services along West Valley View. So these are all part of our long-term community visions, and so very exciting that they're moving forward. For the story, as you folks all likely know, funding was secured for this project in 2018, and so that's when the engineering of the project began, and it was all set for construction in September 2020. The RFP was actually going to be posted, I believe, September 10th. Of course, the fire hit that put a pause on all city projects, and there was concern by council, as well as police and fire, about how this project may impact evacuation in the event of another emergency in Talent. So throughout 2021, the end of 2021, city staff worked with fire services and police services, as well as the city engineer, to see if we could redesign the project to address that concern of how do we keep evacuations safe and as effective as possible if they ever needed to occur again. So we did propose some redesigns of the plans, and that redesign was to create on these bioswales a rolled curb. So meaning it's a slanted curb, which makes the lane wide enough for a vehicle to travel through, and specifically an emergency vehicle. So a fire truck or an ambulance will be able to use the bike lanes as travel lanes in the event of an emergency. The additional benefit that the city is excited about is it also allows our street sweeper to fit in the bike lanes now, so we won't have to clean out leaves by hand every year. So those changes were approved by council in January. We went ahead and posted the construction bid in March, April, May, and I apologize, I forgot a couple of months in my staff report. May is when construction began with groundbreaking. It was supposed to be finished in July of 2022. We've had some pretty significant supply chain issues with this project. The biggest one being some ductile iron supply chain issues. We are adding onto this project a water line replacement that really needed to happen along the West Valley View. And that water line specifically was in such short supply. Brett can fill me in. I believe that we had to actually end up going to Eugene to find one since they were in such high demand. Brett, was that right? Did we end up with the Eugene one?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not sure where they were able to get the pipe from, but it was specifically the pipe to do the electric crossing. It was a pipe that needed to span the length of that bridge, so it was a special order, and the anticipated time to receive that pipe was weeks, not days. That it was delayed. There's other delays in currently in the concrete. Each one of the bioswales has a concrete wall that goes around its entirety, and there's been some delays with getting the concrete delivered as well. I spoke to Knife River and the RH2 engineer today. And at the current point, they are still a week behind from their current schedule, which is April 12th. But they've had some they've had some positive things happen, and I think they'll be able to make it up. So, you know, I asked them for the sake of this update tonight, what date we could anticipate, and they're still anticipating the August 12th date, if all goes as planned from this point on.
Did you say August 12th?
August 12th, yes.
And I will share, you know, recognizing that this project is taking longer than expected, particularly during fire season, which is, you know, one of our potential emergency time of year. Knife River has been really great, and they've been submitting traffic plans to us to ensure that if an evacuation were to occur, we could immediately mobilize and make sure that there's full pavement access for folks to evacuate into or out of Talent in that event. So Brett and I are happy to answer any questions. I'm going to show you one more slide just to show the final segment of West Valley View. So this is from that crosswalk down towards I-5. And this is the concept design from our transportation system plan of what it might look like on the ground with those bioswales in place as protected bike lanes.
Yeah, the left side is the more accurate. That image is from the TSP, and it was an image of two different design concepts. You might remember there was an option to just paint that separation between the bike lane and the traffic lane, or to use the bioswales. The image on the left side of that image is what you'll see at the project completion on both sides of Valley View.
Right. And Brett, I'm going to repeat that because I think there's something next to your microphone that's making it hard to hear you. So the concept that's being proposed in this plan is this side of the street is what it will look like on both sides of the street. Thank you, Brett.
Just for clarity, for discussion purposes, I mean, this is a little rhetorical because I actually listened to the last discussion we had on this last night. And the way it was described after the redesign, which again, I want to commend the collaborative ingenuity on this redesign because I think it's genius. But it's the roll curves are drive over curves on both sides of the lane, correct? Like next to the they called them I think he said something about rollover curves or something. So that's next to the bioswale and next to the sidewalk?
So the roll curve lane is only along the bioswale. There was concern about having it along the sidewalk because it's easier for vehicles to accidentally hop up or bicycles to hop up onto that. So the roll curve will only be along the bioswale section.
Okay, and has that changed? Because I think I got the impression it was going to be on both sides. Is that the way it's always been?
That's the way that it has been always with the engineer changes.
All right. Councilor Postizo?
I think you're on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think you basically answered my question. I just wanted to clarify whether we'd be able to move vehicles on the bike lanes on both sides, and it sounds like we can. So it seems to me that there can be quite a lot of movement along these roads in both directions. And actually, I think it's kind of good that we might be able to put the emergency vehicles along one of the bike paths on the other side of the swales during an emergency, because as everyone's trying to get out, sometimes it's hard for the emergency vehicles to get in. And so having that little bit of separation, I think, might actually serve well in that circumstance. So thanks for answering my question.
Yeah, and that was one of the requests from the fire department, is to have the design be such that exactly that they can be going towards the emergency, or police can be going towards the emergency while everyone else is trying to leave the emergency. So we are setting up traffic plans, traffic control plans that we can just quickly institute depending on which flow of traffic is needed for that evacuation.
That was going to be one of my next questions too. Essentially this becomes a 5-lane potential for evacuation, which is really significant. And, but I recall in listening to the session that Chief Snook had some concerns about just having an accurate and usable evacuation equipment was really, I think, her biggest comment. Said, is that all part of, what she stated was that she had some equipment, but not enough for a full city evacuation, five cones per car, that kind of thing. So are we, as we prepare to open this up on August 12th, will she be fully equipped and an evacuation plan in place by then?
So we did purchase, and thanks to council for in the supplementary budget last year, putting funds in the budget for this purchase. But we have purchased traffic cones and a trailer to quickly transport them to help in an emergency situation for traffic control. We have applied for grant funds, and we actually got a letter of support from the fire district. So we'd hope that they would be shared reader boards, those big traffic reader boards that you see up on the highway sometimes. We've applied to get 2 of those. They're about $20,000 a piece. So we're hopeful that that grant will come through to provide us with those traffic reader boards for that.
Councilor Greider?
Yeah, I don't know if you know this yet, Jordan, but or maybe this is just a given. The routes or the planning that you're talking about with evacuations, is it the center lane then can be used as a lane, right? So that gets incorporated. Is that just a given that that's something that you'll be able to?
Yeah, and we're actually, this was in the department's report, we're hoping to move forward with hiring an emergency preparedness coordinator that can really help coordinate getting these plans in place, sharing them with stakeholders and sharing them with community, as well as various other emergency preparedness projects that we would love to move forward. But yes, that center lane, I think one of the concepts in emergency evacuation is the most effective use of however much surface you have to help move people to safety. So that would include the center lane.
I think that, just to follow up, I think that might, yeah, I mean, I think this conversation in general is or would be useful for people to hear because of these concerns that have been out there and or questions, so yeah, thank you.
I wonder if it would be useful for Hector to create a little video about how this would work. I mean, he's been doing some really, really good outreach with his iPad and making, I call them, it's another movie from the city. And they get great exposure. If you look at the views, there's often many, many views. I wonder if anything, it might be too onerous to ask for something like that, but some kind of presentation that can be, there's just so much confusion about this and so much concern. So just a thought. I'm going to pass it on to Dave, but then I want to come back and talk about the light over there by the gas station, if there's any dysfunction there, and then the timing of the light at Highway 99, whether or not that's going to change with the different lane configuration. Councilor Postizo?
Yeah, well, 2 things. One, just quickly follow up on what you said. I'm unfortunately not familiar with some of the things Hector's been doing, but it sounds like it'd be interesting and helpful. But also we've got in talent a GIS capability that could do something similar. So whatever works best, I guess. But my main question was, I think Jordan talked about some traffic control measures and a trailer to move them out there. And I know from, especially after the Alameda fire, some of the emergency response and sort of debriefing meetings I attended and participated in, one of the problems that in particular Public Works had during this fire was that they had some traffic control things, cones and different things, but getting them from their Public Works storage area to where they were needed took a long time and often ran into too much traffic going the wrong way to get them there. And so one of the solutions that was proposed in these meetings was to see if there's a way that you could create a stash of these things more where you would actually need them. So personnel would have to just get there and deploy them and not necessarily have to, get a trailer from the public works yard and move it all the way over there. So I don't know if that's been considered, because this Valley View seems like it would be one of the places in the city that you'd really want that kind of stuff. So I don't know if that was considered, or if there is a way that some sort of a secure storage could be placed somewhere in that vicinity.
I think that's a great idea. I do not believe that we as staff have yet considered that as a potential, but one I look forward to discussing.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you for this great report. Thank you, Brett, for the great history on this project. And again, my hat's off to all of you guys. I thought this was ingenious and very, very creative, and it managed to accomplish all things. So pretty neat. Councilor Clark?
I believe you were about to ask a question about the stoplights.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. So a couple of concerns I've heard about is that the stoplight over by the Chevron is problematic. I've actually experienced it one time, although I would say that the next couple of times I didn't notice it, but it just doesn't change sometimes for some of the traffic. And then so that may be fixed, but I just thought I'd bring it up. And then the second question was, will the timing of the light at Valley View and 99 change when this is reopened, where it seems, I don't know, I just imagined that there would be more time for people to come off of Valley View, especially during work hours. So does it trigger any changes to the timing of those lights, this reconfiguration?
Yeah, so the light at the Chevron, one of the first things that the construction crew did was to remove the loops. There's sensors in the road. That was so that they had more control over the traffic that was coming through there. If I don't have it in front of me for the exact date, but if you look towards the end of their schedule, it shows the replacement of those loops that will reinstall that sensor in the road. So the light, the way the light works at Hinckley Drive will change at the end of the project. As far as the other end, I believe that there is actually going to be one of the signal lights removed, or at least reconfigured overhead there when you're coming westbound on Valley View, since we're going from a dedicated turn lane to a lane that will be for going straight across the intersection as well as turning. I think that it requires one of the traffic signals to be removed. And ODOT maintains those things for us. So at the end of this project, you will see a change at the light at 99, and the signal light will begin to work like it once did at Hinckley as well.
Great. Anybody else? Well, thank you, everybody. Okay, moving on to the next item is item number 10. And so we'll start with what item review of public records request policy updates as item 10.1. Staff?
Great, thank you. I'll make it short and sweet, and then I'll pass off to Hector to answer any questions that council may have. The city is looking to update its policy on the public records request. These changes, were domino effect from Derek Volkart in his position as, I believe, was planning commissioner at the time, reached out to Oregon's public records advocate, who did a review of our current 2019 policy. So those changes are the majority of changes that have been incorporated into what we'd like to institute. And so the conversation today is to get any feedback from City Council or any comments for us to interweave before we implement. Hector, anything you want to add before we hand it off to Council for questions or comments?
The majority of the changes are in the staff report, just to highlight the areas that we propose to change. There are 5 areas. One, to make it clear what the process is. And there's been some confusion when records requests do come in as far as what that process looks like. And so we want to make it clear, not just for ourselves, but for people submitting a records request. To ensure efficient records processing, to reduce the amount of information we collect from individuals, to make records more accessible, especially regarding fee waivers, right? So sometimes someone might want to look at a document and there is a small amount, but even a small amount might be insurmountable to someone who wants to see, who wants a certain record. And then to match current Oregon regulatory statutes, which have changed since 2019, the last time this policy was visited. In addition, in your agenda packet, you'll have a sample state waiver for meeting the public threshold criteria. And that's something that we would like to implement when determining if a waiver can be granted.
Great. Are there any, Councilor Panamarev?
Yeah, so here's a naive question. Let's say somebody comes in and says, I want to see the agenda for such and such a date. Is that something that requires staff time, or can you direct that person? I'm talking about information that's already available. If you get a request like that, can you just direct that person to that? But you don't have to. We're not on the hook for making copies and handing them some paper.
Yeah, great question, Counselor. And that happens regularly. In fact, this week it's happened several times where someone, for example, wants audio from a certain meeting, and they go through the trouble of submitting the record, emailing it, and then I'll take a look at it, and I just determined that, well, this is publicly available if they had looked at the website, and so then I'll just call the person and let them know, hey, if you look here, this is available for you for free. And then that's it. So that happens regularly. If it just takes a couple minutes to resolve. So yeah, does it answer your question, Counselor?
Yeah, it sure does. So I appreciate that. And I think with the new website, all of that will be, I'm sure that'll be just so intuitive. They'll never call you again. The other thing, I tried to read it through and I might have messed up. It says something about the first hour shall be free. I'm just wondering if that's true for everybody all the time.
Oh,
first half hour, I think.
First half hour, right. It's something I struggle with, especially with staff time. If I have to assign it to somebody else to provide a record. It's really difficult. I think it's easier for me to say, I can waive my time since I'm the custodian and I know where a lot of the records are. But for example, if someone wants to see something from community development, I'm less inclined to waive a record waive a fee at that point, since it's going to require additional staff time, not only mine, but of an additional staff member. So, but by having a waiver request form, it hopefully will clarify these kind of situations.
And I may have misread it. I thought I read that it said, the first 30 minutes shall be waived. It sounded like it was so that's not the case. Okay, great.
Yeah,
great. Currently
it is not. That's right, Counselor. Currently it is not the case. It's more, it's difficult to really determine that currently. So by having this in place, we can have a cleaner policy.
Yeah, I think what we've said about, making things transparent, making, for folks who come in who don't have $20, to help them get the documents they need, all of that is, we're super supportive of that. I think I am. The concern I would have is if there's the promise of doing this work for free could be subject to abuse. I saw that there was a recommended clause about, if one person is abusing, but, sometimes these things can happen
yes,
where it's more than one person involved. And so I guess I'm just saying, I support all of the ideals for this. I just want to be protective of staff time, and I don't want staff to be taken advantage of.
Thank you.
That's the only concern.
Thank you, Councillor. And a quick shout out to Mr. Volkart, and I know he's in the attendees today, for going through the process of contacting Mr. Aubert and receiving the recommendations. So thank you.
Councilor Clark, any questions or comments?
Yeah, I mean, quick comment. I think this is great. I'm happy to see these improvements. Question that came up to me though is under what circumstances would a request for a waiver come before council? When is that under what circumstances is that a staff decision, and are there circumstances where it would come before council? I can imagine, you know, might depend on the size of the request to be waived or something, but does anyone have anything to offer on that?
Councillor, are you saying that in what type of situation would a records request come before council? Is
a waiver, a request for a waiver, you know? So in what circumstances is it just staff discretion? And in what circumstances would it come, you know, what if someone made a request for, I would like my $5,000 fee to be waived, and I'm gonna make this request to the city. Under what circumstances would that a request of that nature come to the council versus being handled by the staff?
That's a good question, Councillor, and I don't have the ORS in front of me, but it's my understanding that the ORS allows the city to bill for staff time. And if someone does not agree to it, or if they request a waiver, I think it might come down to the decision made by staff. And we'd like to build in some additional steps where if someone does not agree with the decision made by the city recorder, that they can then appeal to the city manager. And I think at that point, it would be the final decision.
Actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to jump in to add some more context. So, you know, the definition of when a fee waiver can be granted is based off of the request is going to serve the greater public interest. And so at the moment, the way our policy works is that it is at staff's discretion, specifically Hector, as city recorder, you know, his discretion to evaluate if it meets that public interest threshold. What we're hoping to do with that fee waiver form, and we would like to adapt it to the City of Talent's needs, is to make it really clear what those thresholds are. So that when we evaluate it, we can clearly point to, hi, it does not meet this threshold, or it does meet these thresholds, and so we do or do not. So it's more of an administrative process. We have built into these, you know, recommended changes that if a community member feels that their waiver was denied unfairly, that it can be appealed to me to do a secondary review to see if it meets those thresholds required for a waiver or fee reduction.
Thank you.
I want to actually push that out a little bit, and I've never seen a situation like this happen, so I don't know that it's even necessary. But typically, I mean, when I think about staff using clear and objective standards, which is kind of what you just described, you want to create clear and objective standards to grant, or I think that is when. And those clear and objective standards would be reviewed by the council, I would imagine, as part of the policy, right? And so are you saying that there is no other action a person could take once the staff says I mean, couldn't they appeal to the state or something if they wanted to? Like, isn't there, like, it sounds to me like that's the stop, but I don't think it is. Is there a legal action that people can take?
People always have the option to, you're correct, take legal action.
Okay, all right.
The next step would be to go to the state auditor's office or the public records law office as their next step if they feel that they are not being treated within their legal rights.
That's right. Okay, that I remember that now. Thank you. I just yeah. Okay, perfect. I do think we have a speaker request on this one, or at least somebody's raising their hand. I'm gonna guess it's probably Councillor Ponomarev before I go to the speaker. You?
Yes, thanks. I found the thing in the packet that confused me. So this is just for clarification. This is on page 54. So it's the process. And this, I guess, is the state process. But it says public records request received. And then it says agencies shall waive 30 minutes of staff time at a minimum. So when I read this, that's what confused me. But we're not automatically doing that. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Jordan, for clarifying that. And thanks, Hector, because you clarified it too.
Okay, so Derek Volkart, if you will state your name and city for the record, please.
Yeah, thank you. Derek Volkart, Greater City of Talent. And this is really exciting. I challenge you guys to think about how cool it will be when people call the public records advocate in Salem and ask for model policy on public records requests. And he said, sure, let me send you Talent's policy over. It'll be really cool, which I was pleased when he said he didn't have a model policy. I was like, great, we can become the model policy. This is so cool. A couple things I just want to note. And I think Eleanor, Councilor Penamara, you hit on the point with this, the idea that we don't want the language to be discretionary or subjective. We want it to be clear and objective. Mr. Albert had recommended that first half hour of staff time be waived for the purpose of encouraging, as Hector noted there, encouraging narrow requests. So it actually benefits the staff to basically, hey, folks, if you can pack this into a half hour, let's do it. And it probably should be, it should be shall. You know, you want it, you don't want it to be discretionary, I think. And I think that's the idea that he was indicating. And then likewise, if I can find it here, I was forgetting where it was at. Oh, the actual cost. So the actual cost, that's what you want to bill out as, is the actual cost. You don't want actual costs to maybe charge. You want to bill your actual costs because that is, that's not discretionary. You know, you shall bill your actual costs, except for that first half hour being free. So if Hector makes a 2-minute phone call and get somebody back on track, that doesn't cost anything. After 30 minutes, if it's 35 minutes, they've got 5 minutes. You've got 5 minutes to bill there of actual cost. I just think you really want to adhere to clear and objective standards there, so it's fair, so that somebody isn't getting favor, you know, down the, you know, some time down the road. It's like, oh, I'll just waive this because I may be able to do that. And so that's important. Those two aspects in that cost thing, I think, are important. I went ahead and I emailed the council Albert's comments just because they're also interesting to read. He complimented us on things, and there were things he, you know, took issue with or corrected us on. Actual cost was one of them. He said, hey, it's not reasonable. The statute tells you it's actual cost. And so it's worth looking at those. Yeah, I just wanted to point those two things out. Otherwise, you know, what I'm seeing here is, you know, obviously what I think he was intending, and that's super exciting. It's just really cool. I love this idea that Talent is going to be the model city potentially. And yeah, and I thought there was one more thing that I'm sure I'm forgetting that I thought came up there, and I'm sure I probably did forget it, but thank you for your effort on this front. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Hector, for the great work.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
All right. All right, I've lost my place on my agenda here. 1 second. Next item on the agenda is 10.2, review of urban renewal plan consideration process. Staff?
All right, perfect. So on June 29th, the Talent Urban Renewal Agency did decide to forward their plan to the public review process. At that moment, the role for shepherding through that process switches from Tura to the city. And so I want to just present to you all as the City Council Board what that process and what that timeline will be over the next almost 1 month. So what I have before you here is what has been scheduled. And I just want to highlight what these are so that if any questions, I'm happy to answer. So yesterday, Elaine Howard, myself, and the mayor presented a briefing to the Jackson County Board of Commissioners. On July 26th, our Planning Commission will review the plan to see if it aligns with our comprehensive plan, and they'll make a recommendation to City Council if they believe that it does. Elaine Howard, the consultant, and myself will visit Rogue Valley Transportation District's board meeting next week to also share a presentation to them. August 3rd, I will be presenting the impacts they feel the city finances will experience with the Talent Urban Renewal Plan. I am going to schedule, FYI for you all, an August 16th meeting for a study session. This will be a study session for council to review and address any written comments by impacted taxing districts. It is required that we do respond to any written comments and incorporate them into our ordinance. August 17th, we have a City Council public hearing that will occur. And then August 24th, I'm going to schedule a special meeting for the City Council vote on the ordinance on that second read. So any questions about the schedule or timeline for the urban renewal consideration process?
Councilor Padomoref?
Yeah, just a quick clarification. I just to understand better, when you say incorporate our responses into the ordinance, is that only if we're going to actually change something, or do we actually have to say, do we have to like list all the things in the ordinance?
So we do, the way Elaine explained it to me is that any written comment we receive from a taxing jurisdiction or taxing district, we do have to incorporate our response in the ordinance. And that response is going to be, we either, reject their feedback, we accept it, and we are modifying our plan in this way. And there is one third option that I apologize at 8:30 at night, it's not coming to my mind, but we do have to record in a table what our responses to that written comments are.
In a table that's part of the audio.
That's part of the ordinance.
Okay, very good. Thanks. That does clarify it for me. I had that wrong before.
So I just want to share, I will be sending out hopefully later this week the invites for that August 16th and August 24th meeting, because those will be meetings outside of our regular schedule.
Councilor Panomaref?
Before, can you just tell us right now what the time is for the August 16th one?
I'm going to try and just do it for our regular time of 6:45 p.m. Since that seems to work the best, unless council has a general feeling if there's a time that works better in the evening for them. It will need to be evening, if possible, for Elaine's schedule.
Since my hand's already up, I'd request earlier. If it's a 3-hour process, it's past 9 o'clock. I'd prefer 5:30, like our study session times personally, but whatever works for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Does anybody see that differently? All right, sounds like we'd all prefer that 5:30 time if we can get it.
Great. And just to clarify, 5:30 for both the study session as well as the special meeting.
Yeah, any for the study session and the special meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, 5:30, right? Both times. I mean, I think we can plan that way. We can plan for a lengthy discussion if it comes to that.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
And then what was 10.4 again? I don't know what I did with the note.
Appointment of a hearings officer, though I do see we have one hand raised from council.
Oh, Councilor Perry Miller.
Thank you. Thank you for these dates, Jordan. This is very helpful. for my calendar. Now that we have these, I mean, should we be planning to attend these presentation meetings? I didn't know the date of the Board of Commissioner meeting, but I'm just not sure like what the process is, or if we should just let you do your thing and then hear a report about it later. I'm just not sure what is best.
Yeah, so what the process is Elaine gives a presentation very similar to the one that you all received as the Tura board before deciding to move the plan forward. So really she's given a summary of the plan. I do not let you all know the dates, or I encourage you all, if you are wanting to attend as an audience member, because if we do have a quorum show up, you know, we will have had to have noticed the meeting, that it was going to be a city council meeting as well, which then gets into a scheduling nightmare. I am letting the mayor and the council president know for each of these scheduled meetings so they can attend if they like. But I will say that Elaine is mostly running the show.
That is very helpful. Thank you.
Council Penamarath?
Oh, I just wanted to say I finally listened to the county one, and I thought Jordan, you, Elaine, and the mayor all executed yourselves very admirably. Really great responses to the questions.
Thank you. I will admit that their chairs in their boardroom are so comfortable that I really want to get them for when we go back to in person for you all.
The ones at the dais are actually pretty good too, though.
Okay,
I
good.
will say, yeah.
But sorry, could I just say, but fix the ones in the audience, because those white folding chairs were really uncomfortable.
And a couple of the ones that are in the dais slide down. So you're trying to look serious, but now the counter is about this, you know, this high. So I do encourage everyone to listen to the meeting, just as former Mayor Chris Luz mentioned earlier. He did state some comments from the meeting. They were really out of context, and very much in part. So I definitely want to encourage everybody to listen to that conversation. I too commend the staff for their excellent presentation, mostly as Jordan pointed out, Elaine presented, and she was a consummate professional. And yeah, I thought it was a good conversation. I thought the commissioners asked really good questions, and yeah. Okay, so item 10.3 is the appointments of a hearings officer. Jordan?
Yes, so a hearing officer conducts administrative hearings and renders decisions when an appeal is made against specific type of city decisions. So we typically, our appointed hearings officer was Roger Pierce. He was wonderful, but he has since moved out of the area and he is looking to wind down his contracts. So Roger did make a recommendation to us to reach out to attorney Richard Whitlock. He is a on-contract hearings officer for Jackson County, well known in the area. And so we would like to move forward with appointing Richard to be our hearings officer. I will say this is time sensitive for us right now because we do have an appeal that was filed against one of our type 2 permits for a planned multi-unit apartment. And so we're hoping to get a hearings officer appointed soon to be able to meet the deadlines needed for that appeal process. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and Kristen is here to answer any questions specific to Richard, to the role of the hearing officer and all of that. She did speak with Richard today.
Councilor Penamarath?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Kristen, what's your take?
Hi, good evening, council. I think he'll be great. I think he's anxious to do it. I had a hard time getting attorney to agree to be our hearings officer. Unfortunately, a lot of the attorneys are retiring, so I think he'll be a good fit for us. And since he comes down already to Jackson County to have hold hearings, I think he'll be a good fit for the city as well.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I do want to make a comment. I personally think that our role is really just to approve the budget, and I don't know. I mean, I know that there was at one point in time good hearings officers in the area, but I definitely think that who the staff chooses is entirely up to them. But I appreciate the introductions, and I know this is a really important function for our city. So it sounds to me like both Kristen and Jordan have done a good job. In particular, Kristen done a good job of vetting. So if there's no other questions or comments, I'd entertain a motion. Councilor Penamarath.
Actually, I just wanted to point out there's somebody in the audience who may wish to comment. I see a hand raised.
Well, Mr. Volkart, your hand is still up. Did you want to comment on this item?
Actually, I had my hand up for 10.3.
Well, I thought it was still up from the, I don't think you ever took it down, did you?
I did, but I
Okay.
put it back up for 10.3.
All right, well, let's go ahead and complete this one. And I'll go back to 10.3. All right. I'll entertain a motion. Council Clark.
I move to appoint Richard Whitlock as the City of Talent's hearing officer.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Richard Whitlock as the City of Talent's hearings officer. I think that should we add, Jordan, is there any reason to add the budget amount in to that motion?
No, I just wanted to let you guys know it's within my signing authority, so I can move forward without council approval.
Okay, got it. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Council Clark,
Yes.
Council Penamarath,
Yes.
Council Greider,
Yes.
Council Pastizo,
Yes.
Councilor Byers,
Yes.
Councilor Parra Miller.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mayor.
I just have a technical question. Is it required by statute that the council approves who you choose for a hearings officer? I can see where that might be the case for a
Yeah,
hearings officer.
Our code does state that the hearings officer is appointed by council.
Okay, got it. That clears up my thinking. I was like, why are we, so why aren't we helping them choose somebody? Okay, that makes sense. All right, let's go back to 10.3 and take a comment from Mr. Volkart. Derek, I'm going to put you on a 3-minute timer.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, I thought I was muted. Sorry. Sorry. Glad I was quiet. So I'll try to be quicker than that. I did recall the item that I was going to mention, even though I wanted to speak on 10.3, and that was appeals of public records request waivers do indeed go to the state via proxy through the district attorney. So because I had to file one to Beth Hecker regarding a county public records request. And so that is the path for that. And I just wanted to note that. And sorry, I should have mentioned, I should have apologized earlier for the technical difficulties during the non-agenda comments, but I think my comments fit better in 10.3 anyway. And thanks to Hector for trying to elevate me and get me out of that problem. I think it was my phone and I think I fixed it, but on my old computer now. Regarding the comments of Mr. Mency, and if I bungled his name, I apologize. I partially caught his intro. The gentleman who was disappointed with the council not meeting in person, I just feel like somebody should say this. I share his disappointment and frustration with the status quo on Zoom meetings and talent, but the city manager nearly had council back meeting in person before another wave of COVID torpedoed that, and it's been downhill ever since with respect to the pandemic. It is frustrating as a participant, but for the record, staff has tried to reconvene the council in person. So I think that needs to be stated. And he probably missed it because he's probably not a regular. More specifically regarding the review of the urban renewal consideration process, reasonable minds may disagree with what one may want to see come out of the process. As a former 15-year resident of Talent and an owner of a significant banknote on real property within Talent, I love that the two are aboard, and now the council appears to be on track to maximizing the benefit of Talent residents for our urban renewal district. Maniacal is exactly the hyperbole I would expect from the county administrator when describing Talent's attempt to extract a modest amount from the constantly increasing Jackson County firefight budget to aid in rebuilding our businesses and helping with affordable housing and more. It's no surprise from Danny Jordan, who initially asserted that Talent enacting urban renewal in the fire scar would be illegal. This despite the ORS that clearly maps out a path for municipalities in need of redevelopment or rehabilitation as a result of flood, fire, hurricane, earthquake, storm, or other catastrophe. It goes on, as you all know. So it's difficult to take the county administrator seriously with such hyperbole. I will take your recommendations and listen to the audio. But that hyperbole and hostile language, predictable? Yes. Serious? No, not really. As for terms like unbelievable and criminal, that sounds like Danny speaking through proxy, especially when it comes from residents of a neighboring city who have an urban renewal district that was dead or on its deathbed and is now revived without the consternation from the county. I'd say hypocrisy is truly the greatest luxury. And I commend you all for your dedication to the residents of Talent who want you to maximize to the greatest extent possible the tax dollars we provide in order to restore this city and bring our families home. I say this as someone who has voted for every fire bond before me and as someone who won't suffer the hyperbole of fools. So I thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that is everything on the new business agenda. Moving on to other business and future agenda items. Does anybody have anything here? Jordan?
Yes, another time-sensitive topic that I want to float to the council to see if this is of interest to include in the August 3rd agenda. And a lot of words here, but I'll just quickly summarize. Measure 109 was voter approved in 2020, and it's the psilocybin production and administration. So it's, starting in 2023, it is planned to have legalized use of psilocybin for medical purposes, including the production of psilocybin for medical purposes. Oregon Health Authority is currently producing the administrative rules that will regulate both the manufacture, delivery, sale, and use of psilocybin. Those rules are not expected to come out until very near the end of the year, and the law technically goes into effect January of 2023. So there are a lot of jurisdictions right now that are opting to either put a 2-year moratorium on allowing psilocybin production or administration within their jurisdictional limits to be able to review what those rules were going to be before supporting having them in their communities. Other communities are choosing just to outright set prohibition on psilocybin manufacturing and use. Either way, any option would just send it to the ballot for the voters to decide if they wanted one of those options. My question to council is this a conversation that we all want to have on August 3rd so that we can prepare an ordinance and all the necessary documents for it?
Councilor Clark?
Yeah, I have no interest in any such ordinance as that. The voters of the state of Oregon passed a ballot measure, and there's some implementation steps left for the state to take, but I have no interest in a 2-year ban or prohibition in this matter.
Councilor Pestizo?
Yeah, personally, I'm not really opposed to this idea, and especially since the voters of Oregon approved it. I do have a little bit of hesitation based on what's happened with the legalization of marijuana and stuff in the county, and all of the I guess for me anyways, unanticipated problems and hassles and really law breaking that has resulted from it. And so I would be curious to know what the rules are before we just say, oh yeah, we want that in the city. I anticipate that wouldn't be anything that would really make me want to not go forward, but based on what happened with the cannabis legalization and sort of how that developed in an unanticipated way, there may be some aspects of the psilocybin abilities that could go down a similar path. I don't really know, but I would be interested to know more about it before things started to happen in our city.
Councilor Panamarev?
Yeah, I agree with both of the previous speakers. On the one hand, I'm we could probably check, but I'm sure the voters of Oregon approved this, and I'm pretty sure that our community is also, if you analyze the precinct, we probably would have voted in support as well. This seems like a way to basically stall the progress. I too am curious about how this will roll out, but I think there's some big differences between this and cannabis, mainly, the amount you need to grow. While I'm curious, I don't know that this rises to the level of something that I really want our staff, who is really concerned about the capacity of our staff spending time on. I'm wondering if there's an easy link to pros and cons, perhaps, that Jordan, that you could just send to the council, so we could kind of satisfy our curiosity a little bit, inform ourselves a little bit, to see, it's one thing to be for or against it as a resident. It's another thing to be for or against it as a policymaker. So it feels to me that it's different from cannabis, just because of the land use aspect. But I could be wrong about that. So I think that at this point, if it doesn't take any time to send us a link, maybe just to League of Oregon Cities, whatever, pros or cons. But I don't really think it's something I'd want to see staff spend time on.
Perfect. And just to clarify, so what I'm hearing is there is so much out there already, since other jurisdictions are having the same conversation. So I don't think it will be a large staff capacity. But what I will do is I'll prepare the potential for just the 2-year ban, is what I'm hearing is the only potential topic of interest, and not also have to create an ordinance potentially for the prohibition entirely. Would that be an accurate? That is what I'm hearing. Is it's a great discussion to have next meeting. If we prepare an ordinance, it will be specific to the 2-year rather than the full prohibition.
So we've heard from 2 and 3, and there's 2 different opinions, and then one kind of, I didn't get any clarity from you, Councilor Panamarev. Maybe it was just me.
You're right. I don't want staff to spend time on this. I'm not really interested. I'm interested in reading about it, maybe with a link. I'm not really interested in seeing something on the agenda, unless there is, unless we think this is something important that we need to do. So I'm with Clark.
I think what I'm missing from this conversation is staff recommendation. And sometimes I've noticed a kind of a style of dropping decisions in front of us. I'm not complaining about the style, so it's not a criticism per se. But sometimes I feel like I want to know what the staff needs from a situation. Like you brought it to us. There must have been a reason why you brought it to us, more than, I'm guessing, more than just this is what everybody's talking about. And I could, and maybe not. And if not, that's what I want to know, is like, this is the only reason we're bringing it to you. Or staff has some concerns, chief has some concerns, somebody has some concerns about this. And I want to know about that, because we might be missing something that can impact the way your job is. And to me, that weighs into the decision. And so in general, I would encourage staff, wherever there's an opinion, please give it to us, and then ask you at this time, is there any staff opinion on this?
Admittedly, staff hasn't had, we haven't had the chance to dive into it ourselves to really look at and analyze it. I put it on tonight's agenda because I just learned today that the deadline for getting something on the ballot of this topic is the first week of September. So there's just a time crunch. So I wanted to see if this conversation is one that the council would want to engage in prior to that deadline. What I'm hearing is it's absolutely worth a conversation and definitely worth for staff to also discuss to come up with a recommendation. So I will put it on that August 3rd agenda, and I will get you all some reading material well beforehand so that you all could come to the table informed, and we'll also create a staff recommendation to go with it.
Okay, so I just heard you say that you're gonna use your authority as a city manager and put it on the agenda. So this is not a whether or not at this point. And I'm fine with that. Like there's no problem with that. That is absolutely your prerogative. So I appreciate the fact that we're going to get to hear from staff on it. And if there's no other comments, we can just go ahead and move on. So this will be up for discussion on August 3rd. Thank you, Jordan. Anybody else with some other? I have a little bit of other. This isn't so much about getting agenda. Well, it is actually. One of the things that came out of my listening session last night on the reprofiling discussions was in the last discussion. There was we had been contemplating when we first started to discuss our concerns about the evacuation safety. It was recommended or suggested that we do a study and of a more kind of like a broader study of the whole city. And I think you determined, speaking with an evacuation specialist, that such a study would be about a $40,000 scenario. Does this ring a bell? And I do, after the motion was made, Councilor Penamarav said, you know, I still want to consider the study. And so I heard that, and it made me feel like, okay, I'm going to bring it back onto the discussion. I would imagine we could get a grant for such a thing. It would seem that we could, given the nature of the subject. And I just want to let the council know that that was mentioned in that meeting. And is there any desire to bring that to a near-time council meeting to discuss with staff whether or not that's even necessary or any? I mean, it was left at, I still want to see us have a conversation about this study. That's where it was left. So I'm just leaving it up. I'm doing what I just said staff does, and I'm just going to leave it up to you guys. I honestly, yeah, I think something along those lines. I'm not going to do that. I think something along those lines would be good. Maybe what I see is maybe reevaluating the scope of the study, and given we probably know more than we did then, and then maybe reassessing the cost. That's what I think. Councilor Penamarav? Yeah,
I don't see any reason not to do a study. I think $40,000 is it's worth it. People are really concerned, and I think without information, it just adds to anxiety. Also, just, you know, for our future, as we look and hopefully we do our transportation plan and all of that, it'd be good to have, you know, just the concepts in place, the practicalities, and just really educate ourselves. So yeah, I think this should be a priority. I think the price is okay. But you know, again, I do want to hear from staff recommendations.
And you don't need to, I don't think I'm asking for that to happen tonight. I'm just saying maybe we can have this discussion, can bring up the discussion at a future meeting. And it does it.
I'm just saying the sooner the better.
Yeah. Does it fit? I agree. Does it fit in any of our goals? I don't have them in front of me. I wish I would have looked before the meeting so I could answer that question myself, but.
Our transportation goals are mostly focused on bike and pedestrian accessibility.
I think, yeah, this might be a little bit different, but maybe we can jam it in there. Counselor Penal.
Yeah, I think, didn't we have this huge safety goal? I know we did last year.
I'll look.
I'm pretty sure
question.
it's right up there.
I'd love to see us have evacuation demonstrations, or videos or something like that when we eventually have a
Or the
plan.
whistles, the whistles that blow.
Yeah.
Tell people to get out of town.
The town that I lived in. Councilor Pestizo.
Yeah, I may just not be aware of some of this happening in Talent, but because of my role in Medford, since the Alameda fire in particular, I've been involved in lots of emergency planning and studying. And I think there's definitely a value in there. I think what the mayor said that, we should probably evaluate where we are now and decide where we go. And I agree with Councilor Penavroff that it's a high priority and that some money is worth being spent here, because from what I see, which again, I could be missing a fair amount, we haven't had the opportunity to do as much planning, things as, like I brought up earlier about, just caches of traffic facility, things that are, just thinking through some of the things we could do so that we can have, if we do have another big disaster, we're in a better place to respond than we were the last time. I just think it's worth doing something along those lines. And if I've missed planning that city staff has already done, I apologize for that and would like to hear about it.
Okay, well, leave it to you, Jordan, to find the appropriate space and time for that conversation. Thank you. Anybody else? I do see a hand in the audience, and we are past the speaker request period of the agenda. So we would invite you to come back and speak on the next agenda, which is August 3rd, where you can sign up and speak on non-agenda item. Okay. If there's nothing else on other, there are written communications on the agenda. That's item number 12. And then there is adjournment as item number 13. So if there's nothing else, I will adjourn this meeting at 9:08 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.